Hello, welcome to the Realm of Ideas is Free to All. My name is Bruce Gemmel. I'm here with Julie Rauer, who will join us in a minute. It's our series of ruminations about our feelings about our ideas, the nature of ideas as pertains to us. This is episode 64. It's called Emotional Character 2. It's following on episode 50, which was on the 9th of November, talking about emotional character. And basically, the title is "What It Is: How to Spot It, what is its importance." I think the first time I started with a quote from Freud pertaining to his analysis of Dostoevsky in Character and Culture, and this time I'm kind of like going back to a piece that's one of my favorite books, which is his analysis of Leonardo da Vinci as a child and a childhood dream. But anyway, let me read first the piece that started with us in episode 50. A moral man is one who reacts to temptation as soon as he feels it in his heart without yielding to it. A man who alternately sins and then, in his remorse, erects high moral standards lays himself open to the reproach that he has made things too easy for himself. He has not achieved the essence of morality, which is renunciation to temptation. For the moral conduct of life is a practical human interest. Now, in that case, we talked about character, and it could be understood that we were talking about in terms of the individual. Now, the individual is always important, but what we're trying to talk about is the nature of understanding character as expression and an artistic work. So, from this piece, and again, I said in the beginning of the first piece that the analysis was keen. It missed a key point, however, which basically kind of may nullify some of the final conclusions. But I believe in which, like I said, Freud's ability to draw gave him an understanding of Leonardo that was essential because drawing was basically the way, it was the language through which Leonardo expressed himself. So anyway, in this piece, in section 4, he says, kindly nature has given the artist the ability to express his most secret mental impulses, which are hidden even from himself. Remember that. By means of the works that he creates, and these works have a powerful effect on others who are strangers to the artist and who are themselves unaware of the source of their emotion. Can it be that there is nothing in Leonardo's life work to bear witness to what his memory preserved as the strongest impression of his childhood? No, of course not. So the reality is, in this case, the essence by which certain studies take place is to find that which may, in fact, have been beyond the aspect of the original artist or the original author. Work does not belong to the artist the moment that it's created. The moment that the work is created, it basically becomes independent. It has its own life. And the comment of the artist may not be as important as the comment of other people, as they may be able to find that a deep resonance that may have kind of been missed or was unconsciously understood only within the original work. So the nature of the depiction of character is key to insight into nature and therefore the essence of the artistic expression, right? And that's one of the things that we'll kind of talk about here. I believe that as we move towards what ever comes next in terms of like epoch, era, whatever we want to call it, we need to kind of start to understand what those impulses are. I mean, Ortega would call it like the destiny within a generation. But in this case, we're kind of like moving through these confusions and kind of conflagrations and other kind of things. And right now, it seems very messy. But the point is, what we will basically kind of maintain will be those things that have served us well. Nothing is ever completely new from which something doesn't kind of like continue. The question is sometimes in the new era, we kind of take for granted that which is most important. which is that which we knew, which is basically what I've just said. So anyway, with that said, let's get into this again. Now, again, the point is the reason we're talking about character is not basically in terms of the expression of the individual, it's through the expression of the individual's work. So, with that said, let's bring out the most important part of the show. What's new in Julie? And here's Julie with her notes and everything.
Yes.
And yes. Okay.
Okay. Well, a lot is new. Sorry, I'll get that later. Hello. So a lot is new. Enjoyed the scone. It's great. I love a good scone. So I created this. I will hold it since you are doing scone hands. So
it's Stonehenge.
That's funny. Isn't it? Isn't it yummy? I told you it was good. You don't want to wait too long, because then it'll get stale. So I will hold it because I don't want the buttery
I can tell
goodness.
it's going to scale.
It'll be hard as a rock.
It's always hard as a rock.
It was soft and fluffy.
It's very soft and fluffy.
No, it's not hard as a rock. I will hold this. So this is my drawing from today that I did at the Met.
Brilliantly.
Thank you. I created this entire portrait in about an hour and a half. Prior to this, there were just the conjoined ears. And I will explain what I'm doing here. This is a science drawing. And the reason why it is a science drawing is, in fact, about a discovery that was really one of the greatest, I think, and one of the most important in mycology, the study of fungi and mushrooms. This one was specifically in lichenology. I'll have tea. So for hundreds of years, those who studied lichens or lichenologists thought that a lichen was a hybrid creature of two symbiotic organisms. So it was, in fact, they thought, it turns out mistakenly, a partnership of a fungus and a photosynthesizing, usually an algae, or it could be also photosynthesizing cyanobacteria or other types of, save some for Pete,
of course,
of photosynthesizing bacteria. So there needed to be a way for the lichen to basically, take the energy of the sun and make carbohydrates or food. And that was the role of the photosynthesizing partner. And the mass, or the main body, the main substance of the lichen was a fungus of various kinds. However, in 2016, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was one Dr. Toby Spribil who discovered, much to everyone's shock, and these are people who'd been studying lichens for their entire lives, that there was a hidden third fungal partner that nobody had ever seen or knew about or even imagined, interestingly. A Basidiomyces yeast, specifically a yeast, a type of fungus. But why a yeast? Very importantly, yeasts are engines of toxicity. I like your T-Rex arm. So I will have some more after we're done. Why I say that is yeasts can really churn out toxins. Now, bad if you're coming up against a yeast, really great if the yeast is your third hidden fungal partner and are part of your form, your structure. They are part of you. It's like having the greatest weapon growing in your cortex. And in fact, that's where Dr. Spribil found this hidden, mysterious, unseen, unimagined third fungal partner, which explained an awful lot. he noticed it, I believe. I read part of his research when looking at ostensibly, oh, sorry, two lichens of the same species, which looked entirely different from each other.
Yeah.
It would be like looking at me, looking at Bruce, and then suddenly a third head pops up in between us, which looks nothing like mine and nothing like Bruce's, and could not have really been generated by either one of us, yet it exists with us in the same space at the same time. Kind of a mind-blowing thing. So it turns out that this Basidiomycete yeast, and I will explain why, existed only in the cortex of the lichens. And many, many lichens. And when they now understood this and went back and looked at fossilized lichens, guess what? There was the yeast. So in fact, the yeast was fundamental to lichen anatomy and function and physiology from the time of the dinosaurs and before. So why the yeast? So the cortex also is the thin outer layer. It would be like there would be tiny little particles floating around just in my skull, but not in my brain and not in the rest of my body. That is the analogy. So it turns out these toxins protect the lichen from being eaten. They protect it from other lichen. They protect it from predators and infection by a virus, a bacteria. They are its armor. So, in fact, they are its guardian angel. Mm-hmm. Isn't that beautiful? Mm-hmm. So that's what my drawing is, in fact, about. So what I have done is I have taken a Cambodian, it's actually a 4-headed piece in the Southeast Asian wing at the Met. The way I've photographed it in my own viewpoint makes it a 3-headed piece, but it is conjoined at the ears. So it is made into one entity. It is conjoined at the crowns. It is conjoined at the ornament and the substance and the core. And if you see, here is the lichen coming off the crown, coming off the core, onto the forehead of the Cambodian god. So the point is, the other head will contain the Basidiomycete yeasts, and the third head will contain the photosynthesizing organism, or the algae.
Okay.
And that is my metaphor.
Interesting.
How's about them potatoes?
Interesting. Let's make sure we don't become like an Archambaldo. Remember the librarian who's basically made of books?
No, I know who Archambaldo is.
I mean, I know. But I think that like
very subtle.
No, I understand that, but I kind of like, I can see that particular. I mean, that's just an observation. I don't see that yet, but I mean, I know that as pieces are delineated, they have a tendency to kind of like, make up the structure rather than kind of like, kind of becoming part of it.
No, they're part of it, and they will be emerging from
that's fine.
The structure.
Yeah.
Unless I make them out of cauliflower. Don't worry.
Okay.
That's
so
funny.
That is. Okay. So all right.
Put my drawing in a safe place.
Mm-hmm.
I will photograph it when I'm done.
Mm-hmm. But this actually is interesting in the fact that it kind of points out something that we were talking about, which is the fact that it's in any situation, what deepens our consequence or understanding is finding that perspective that allows us an insight that we previously didn't benefit from. So, like I said, one of the things that I feel is common, and I've kind of heard this from other people as well, is that there's an impulse of dissatisfaction, a lack of compelling insights, observations, and even perspectives, and at the same time an obsession with technique. Now, again, people always hear me rag on technique, and it's like, I don't dislike technique. I mean, I find technique is a beautiful thing. It's an incredibly important thing, but I think it's distracting if it doesn't have purpose. So my feeling is I'm not opposed to technique, just don't appreciate it if it becomes a substitute for compelling speculation formulation.
Mhm.
I think when it basically becomes its own sensual distraction, it becomes exactly that, a distraction.
Mhm.
So in that case, I feel as if it was like something that we were talking about last week, which is the fact that if something is, let's see, what was I saying? Saying that last week about the fact that something has, oh, I'll have to remember it. I don't know, it's kind of lost off the top of my head. So, what was that? Oh, can't remember it. But it still kind of lends this idea of kind of seeing what was not understood, was not comprehended. And I think in terms about, you know, there's that spectrum between what I call the beauty and truth, beauty being sensed and truth being articulated. And I think if one can go back and decipher some of what that was in the previous iteration, it is of consequence, and it deepens our understanding. I think what we'll talk about in the future will be that relate in relationship to those things that kind of come from the things that kind of make up that which is going forward. I think what I was trying to say was something in relationship to the kind of formulations of the new epoch or new era, and
Mhm.
how that was to make, but I kind of lost it at the moment. So anyway, that's the beginning. So you had a particular um, direction that you were going, which was different than mine, which is more kind of like of an Eastern perspective, which is much more in keeping with the nature of some of the things that you do.
Yes. Would you like me
Yeah,
to launch?
yeah. Mm-hmm.
I have a number of notes. I can delve into any of them.
Hmm.
I will start with the East and then head to the West. How's that?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So the idea here is, and most Westerners are very unfamiliar with this, but my notes are dealing with a particular set of sprite like imps, which manifest from a very unusual source. They're called Suku Mogami. So, in Japanese folklore, these Suku Mogami are tools which have acquired, in a very interesting way, a kami or spirit. Now, it's not an earthy, crunchy thing. It's actually a pragmatic, it's spiritual, it's artistic, it's deeply emotional, and very much a whimsical and a poetic treatment of the quotidian.
Mm-hmm.
So there is something that is a tangential topic called a yokai, which are supernatural entities and spirits, including a huge range of beings, shapeshifters, demons, ghosts, and tricksters. Tricksters are abundant in Japanese folk and fairy tales, which can appear as bestial figures, but here our concern is when they appear as Sukumogami, which are possessed objects or humanoids that rise out of tools and household tools, really very, very much everyday tools, embodying the mysterious and uncanny aspects of nature and human emotions. And this is precisely what we are talking about, is the emotional spirit and content of artwork, because in fact most of these objects were works of art. These were not made in some factory. These were made in, in the 1500s. These were made in the 1600s and the 1700s. So these are handmade sandals and sword sheaths and tea bowls and teapots. These are handcrafted objects. These are pieces of art
Mm-hmm.
that have acquired a rich emotional interior life that is then manifested. And here is the key thing. The personas mirror human emotions in a rather huge way. Their traits can be anything from playful to helpful to mischievous or puckish, even malevolent, and occasionally benevolent. When I do think that's how people were seen. They were occasionally benevolent, but for the most part, they really had a prickly edge. So this idea of the Tsukumogami or a yokai of tools started in the Middle Ages in Japan, but as it is understood now, this term can be applied to virtually any object, and this is the key thing, that has reached its 100th birthday and has thus become alive and self-aware. So, in a very funny aside, people in Japan would throw out any household object or tool at age 99 to prevent it turning on its 100th year into a spirit. But what they were doing was they were stamping out the emotional life or perspective life of these tools.
Interesting.
Yes.
Huh. I kind of like gets us kind of, I guess what happens is in these cases there's somewhat of a kind of an archetypal kind of consequence to these type of things, in the fact that like you could see someone within a certain identifiable character. You did the piece about the ocean, and the fishermen, where like there's actually an individual, because almost like there's a mythology here towards these things. I mean, I guess
you might want to be specific on my piece because you were mentioning it in case.
What was the? I don't remember. I brought it up. Like, because that was the one about the.
Was the Pearl Fishers, the Pearl Fishers opera.
Right.
Yeah.
But you actually had the character who was that person who looks over the fisherman and looks over the fish and kind of like is manifest as an individual. So, the fisherman and the fish and this activity is overseen by an individual persona that has certain characteristics. Yes. And I mean, in mythologies, there are often these kind of...
the Japanese god Ebisu.
Ebisu,
yes.
Right. Okay, I remember that. So, in my case, what I'm talking about, again, kind of coming at it from what I consider like my own classical Western perspective, is the idea of the expression of the piece itself, which has these characteristics, but basically starts from the depiction of the character within itself, within nature. I was speaking to someone today about the fact that we don't exist in a kind of static kind of circumstance, that things come into being and they cease. Things are in a state of kind of like instability, and eventually kind of like we need to kind of understand them from the circumstance. Kind of what I was speaking of before about the fact that from where we are to where we go, what are those things that are significant that we take for granted but understand and don't leave behind? Kind of what Freud's talking about, in the fact that there are certain things that we are aware of but may not necessarily understand or even be kind of like conscious of. I think that's kind of one of the things that we kind of seem to kind of aim for in the kind of organic design thinking mentality, is the fact that these impulses not only need to be preserved, they need to be kind of functioned. So that's kind of one of the things that I believe in my case needs to kind of be part of that process-based mentality as we kind of move forward. So I find this interesting, the fact that there are these kind of personas, and they kind of like almost embody, I mean, maybe in a way in which you create your objects and create your paintings and your drawings, these things actually become the characters. Now, so what I'm talking about is the expression of character in a likeness or in a piece. But in this case, you're talking about the kind of drama of the interplay of characters as a kind of relationship to nature, to how it expresses itself.
Yeah, and the piece, which was made by a craftsman, and is of itself a work of art. I mean, these are
Mm.
pieces that were handmade. This
Mm.
wasn't a time of mass production.
Mm.
So these are individually crafted works of art,
Mm-hmm.
which do acquire a self-awareness and emotional character. They almost gain the wisdom of, say, an entire human life in
Mm.
their dealings with humans, which I think is actually very, very key. Power battery. Oh,
Mm-hmm. I get it.
gotta plug that in.
Mm-hmm.
It suddenly got
Yeah.
very dim.
Yeah.
I thought it was plugged in.
Mm-hmm. I get it.
Oh, sure. So yeah, can I help?
Nope.
Okay. So yeah, so it does seem that when an object has had a long life side by side with its owner or creator or someone in fact who's traded it or purchased it, that it's almost like horizontal gene transfer in the bacterial world, in the natural world, where the object does acquire many of the traits of the humans that it serves
Mm-hmm.
or lives with or is used by.
Well, I mean,
Mhm.
I guess also it kind of
Mhm.
like projects as being created in that all these who act within this activity are created within the image of this individual, almost like our
Mhm.
Christian God, in the fact that all are created in His image, in the fact that certain personality traits may in fact manifest. So again, in that kind of archetypal sense, the sense that all fishermen or all fish had this kind of like character within which they could manifest themselves. And I guess the observations by which people had come by before they actually manifest and created these characters. Um, but again, like I said, the difference is character as opposed to characters. In the fact that
Mhm.
like one is a kind of drama and the other one is kind of like trying to understand the way in which someone has expressed a
Mhm.
certain thing. And going back to my sense that as we get obsessed with
Mhm.
technique, we sometimes miss the fact that we haven't expressed much and that the sensuality it kind of like of the technique becomes so powerful that it becomes a thing into itself. I think the fact that we are starting to have that kind of like distraction and dissatisfaction is telling in the fact that we have lost the ability to depict character in a compelling enough way that we can see the next from where we are.
Mhm.
So I kind of find a lot of times when I look at work or listen to work or see work, I find very little in terms of just simply kind of like, I mean, sometimes people can be overly emotional, but I mean, I would say that that kind of like cognitive empathy, where I actually feel something, where I can kind of sense the perspective of something beyond myself, but and that in itself that is being expressed is of consequence,
Mhm.
is extremely exceedingly rare.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I have two Western examples of
Say,
this when you're, please.
no, that was it.
Oh, okay. I would like to hop from the east to the west and discuss Max Ernst,
Mm.
one of my favorite painters, a leader of surrealism, my favorite art movement next to Art Nouveau and Art Deco. But the surrealist art movement probed the human subconscious in a way that I think nothing else did. This is when Freud's work came onto the desks of those who drew, who painted, but it was not taken up, it was not incorporated into their lexicon, but it was for the surrealists, Salvador Dali and Paul Klee and Max Ernst. A Nero vision of the human mind was a nightmare of fantastical creatures, impossible spaces, and in fact, an alien alphabet of symbols and signs that permeated all of his works and was really not understood by I should say, even a lot of his contemporaries. So I will point out a very specific case where the invention of a prevalent technique was in service of intense emotional states, and that is grattage. And that's a Grattage. It comes from the French word for scrape away. And in fact, it was invented, they think, in about 1926 by Ernst, when he would lay the canvas that he was working with over a series of objects. The objects usually were a series of inorganic and organic objects of varying and diverse forms and textures. Specifically, he would put the paint on the canvas and scrape it away so it would take on the textures, the forms, and the structures of the objects that were rather randomly placed underneath. But then Ernst would take that randomization and organize it into highly structured compositions. And this led up to what he did leading up to World War II. Did you want to say more, or should I finish out this, Ernst?
Yeah, go ahead.
The artists working of the day all saw World War II coming almost a decade before it came. And the thing is, they painted it and they drew it and they wrote about it, and nobody believed them or took them seriously, and they really should have. Ernst painted a series of forests, almost all of them using grattage.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
You know, it's funny. Like that brings up an interesting point. We sense a dissatisfaction. Would you want to say more?
The only thing is extreme anxiety, disquietude, and angst.
Yeah, I think, interestingly, I think in the sense that I was talking about before, the dissatisfaction doesn't come from a sense of premonition. It just comes from the fact that things have become so inertial and they've run aground and they've ceased to be able to kind of like manifest anything compelling. But I think this is an interesting thing, is the fact that I feel, and I know, that at least you feel as well, a sense of unease that very much like the 1930s, there was a sense of a coming impending conflagration. And I certainly see the fact that we've certainly lost the ability of individuals to kind of convey a sense of leadership. We'll talk about that in the future. But I think what happens is, unless someone can convey a purposefulness, and we talked about this, I think, before when we were talking about the fact that, a lot of people, I think, when they become kind of retrograde, they start to manifest this idea of power and this idea of coercion. But I still believe that it was very clear, and Ortega made it very clear in the Revolt of the Masses, that like you don't, that, and I think Whitehead talked about this too, is that the ability to be persuasive without coercion comes from the superiority of formulations and speculations. No one rules by force. One simply kind of subverts people and kind of suppresses. But in order to rule, one basically has to set about the fact that people concede, right, to understand the fact that this is something of mutual benefit. And I think that the idea of the power type mentality always ends up in there is no mutual benefit. There simply is oppression. There simply is, the fact that we want to take away the power from this group and basically bestow it on ourselves.
It's not mutualism.
No, it's not. It's actually exclusivism.
It's not symbiotic.
Exactly. No, it always. I mean, and the reason why it ends in totalitarianism is that's basically the mold. The mold is not an egalitarian rule of law. It's basically a set of kind of like subversions to basically suppress those that might basically question you. And the thing is, anytime when questioning is subverted, you have an unhealthy reality. Social liberty and kind of like liberalism stems from the idea of expanding social liberty and kind of like freedom as far and as wide as possible. And therefore, like these ideas are kind of the things that, I believe are essential to got to go to this next phase, because we haven't really been given a substitute that would guarantee the same benefit. So in that case, I think that as well, um, technique is floundering because I know now, I know what it was. I was saying about the fact that certain is like the need to teach people to think. And the point is, in order to teach people to think, or in order to kind of like get past a kind of simple obsession, a narcissistic obsession with technique, is what is the attitude by which this manifests? That was a piece I forgot before. How does this manifest?
Well
Now,
said.
prior, we had the critique before of kind of like Whitehead, when he was talking about, adventure. And he talked about the fact that in the metaphysical stasis, we had two basic overbearing things. One was the static case, and one was the interconnected case. Things were not interconnected, things were not static. We're starting to see, at least in engineering and the sciences, a sense of interconnectedness. It's starting to manifest itself in architecture. I mean, I think it's kind of like more an ambition at this point in architecture than it's actually a real manifestation. But I believe that the impulse is starting to come. So the idea is, in terms of teaching to think, what is the attitude? Now, for me, it's always seemed obvious that attitude is process. But in order to kind of come to see how that manifests, I believe it manifests from more expressions of the unconscious, which is why I feel the interest, the obsession with technique has to give way to a true, honest reevaluation of the expression of character. Right now, not character of the individual, right? Like being good people, because that's irrelevant. It's about the expression of the character of the work that we generate, right? Just the same, we talk about the character of Poiret, we talk about the character of Picasso, not in terms of who they were, but in terms of the character of the work that they generated, right? Okay, all right, go ahead. That was basically that.
Well, I will go back.
I'm glad I remembered that. Maybe we're doing it too many in the morning. But I actually, we're okay. Well, yeah.
I think we're overthinking this, but yeah.
I always overthink things.
We always do. That's what we do. Anyway, jumping back to, why did Ernst develop the technique of grattage to manifest his forest, these roiling, dense forests that looked like nothing else? That is precisely why. Because the idiom of the classic forest paled in comparison to the oncoming World War II and the horrors of the war. He needed a new way to make the forest monstrous, because the forest was not always monstrous. Yes, in Grimm's fairy tales, the forest is always a place of witches who lure children to eat, with houses made of candy, of goblins, of shapeshifters. Like, the forest is a dark and forbidding place. Arnold Schoenberg's marvelous piece, which I just love, Transfigured Night, which is one of the most haunting, and for anyone who has not
don't listen to it before bed.
No, it will haunt you. It is the story of a couple who's not really a couple, who enters a forest, who finds that the woman is pregnant by another man, and he has always loved her and is on the verge of murdering her, when in fact has a change of heart and decides to embrace her and another man's child, and they reconcile in the forest. But it basically, and anyway, I digress because I have something really important else to say.
Sorry.
So Egon Schiele. Now, this is very important. You're not allowed to take photos of anything at the NOI, but you are allowed to have their brochure. And for those of you who have not seen this staggering emotional portrait, are you okay?
Yep.
This is a portrait of Dr. Erwin von Graf. And the reason why this portrait is infused with intense emotionality is multifold like a hydra with multiple heads. So, Erwin von Graf was at Egon Schiele's deathbed when he died at only age 28, for those of you who don't know, in the horrific influenza pandemic of 1918, which wiped out huge portions of the world, actually. I mean, that was really a pandemic to end all. He could not save the life of his treasured friend and colleague. He actually assisted in the birth of a child who was a friend of Schiele's. He also worked in a cancer ward and worked with radiation and X-ray therapy. And X-ray therapy was a terrible idea. And it gave him something called radiodermatitis. And if you look at his arms, this is a case of technique. I got one for you too, where there is a brutality and a bestiality and a gnarly, burnt, twisted look that at first glance seems brutal, unsophisticated, but in fact, Germany in the glitter and doom age before World War II, after World War I, it was the refuse and the abject state of horror that the German, their entire lives were upended. You would literally have a wheelbarrow of money to buy a loaf of bread because their currency was worth nothing. You had women who were fine and sophisticated selling their bodies as prostitutes because they had no other choice. You also had a lot of German men who fought in World War I when they were first starting to put people together again, but had no idea how to do it
Like
well.
the Christopher Pike Star Trek.
Yes, say it about never seeing a human before.
Never seeing a human before.
Yeah. So you had not just a few, you had a society that was bent and broken with amputated legs, amputated arms, eyes of glass, half of their face gone. It was a very horrific time. And this doctor treated a lot of those people and treated women in the psychiatric ward and had Egon Schiele there drawing them. They had a very intense 8-year, friendship. It was a patronage, and this portrait was a thank you for saving the life of his friend and her unborn child. But he worked with X-ray therapy, and his fingers are mangled. His fingernails fell off. He actually had holes in his fingers. And the skin melted off his bones.
If you remember, in Young Frankenstein.
Yeah, good times, yeah.
In Young Frankenstein, there was
That's for you.
The I guess the Burgermeister who kind of came and like he had like a mechanical arm and he was like
character and a false eye.
Right, exactly.
And a false jaw.
I was talking with somebody the other day.
Actually, that's
working in architecture and construction and engineering, I remember the fact that it was common when I first was in the business, which is now going back like 40 years, to see people missing fingers, missing hands, major scars, eyes. It didn't have the intense, horrifying nature of like the glitter and doom, but it was something that it was commonplace for people to have because of the fact that they worked with unguarded tools
and no PPE,
and not proper. So it was common for people to die. It was common for people to be mangled. It was, and I do remember even in my own generation now that a lot of the people who I kind of came through with or kind of moved on or retired, a lot of the bodies, though they're not they're not mangled and damaged. I mean, it still happens. They are broken. I mean, I know that guys who spend 20 years, 30 years doing these things and then retired even from the union trades that did a better job of looking after people. We've done a lot to kind of save ourselves from fatalities. But at the same time, we still have not saved ourselves from mangling the bodies. And,
Yeah,
the
this is
kind
a
of
very
the,
good analogy.
the asbestosis and some of the other things that kind of have befallen a lot of guys, especially kind of like pipe fitters, guys who worked with asbestos and, things like that. Silicosis is still a big thing. But we will look back and say that, yeah, we have come a long way from the time that we had gone, but we will probably be looked upon by future generations as having the same kind of like primitive understanding of things that we looked upon those people who had come before us. So I think in this case, it really is about trying to understand that attitude by which the things that are going to manifest are going to come about. Julie and I have been talking a lot about the idea of like, certain things manifest at certain times, certain abstractions take place. And what, we've talked about in terms of like certain unbreakable bonds. What will be the unbreakable bonds that we will formulate either to kind of like dismantle and reconstruct those things that we have? Where are they? Are we seeing them? And those are the kind of things that I think help us understand that next phase. I mean, a lot of times people would kind of say, for people who don't have a tremendous kind of sympathy or connection to the contemporary circumstance, that these people are nostalgic, sentimental, or want to go to a different time. I do want to go to a different time, but not into the past. I want to basically just kind of like sharpen our focus so we can basically have a cleaner transition into that which comes next. So it's the idea of trying to find out what indeed that is,
So emotion as a raw, crude, broken toy. This is very important. Egon Schiele could draw beautifully in the classical style. That's what most people don't know. I do. I've studied his work. I've seen great quantities of it, mostly owned by the Neue Gallery, that I would urge you all to go to. This show just opened last week. Had a meeting there. And thank you to our new YouTube subscribers at the Neue. Is they do an excellent job there of framing the artwork and the time in history. It was a brutal time, a turbulent time. Most of the people in Wiener Werkstatt died. Franz Marc, an incredibly talented painter, died at age 36 in World War I as a soldier. He's supposed to be a soldier. He was a painter. And while Gustav Klimt had a very gilded, articulate, beautiful, and refined style, that was his personal response to the goriness, and gore is the word, and utter inhumanity of the time. That was his view. Egon Schiele's view was very, very different. He could certainly draw in a fluid, beautiful classical style, but he chose to, as in the portrait here, put the human body at brutal angles, impossible joint angles, where skin is falling off the form, where a face is twisted and contorted into a circus of grotesqueries. This was very, very intentional, much like the way of the Japanese tools, which actually exact a vengeance. So if they are thrown away after a life of service to the owner of the tools, after they have received their souls, they exact vengeance far beyond pranks and get very angry at the humans who threw them away. And they actually have a ceremony called a jinga that is performed in Japan to console broken and unusable items, to actually soothe the raw emotions of those those objects closest to us that have been forgotten and discarded. It's
Hmm.
actually a very wrenching idea.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
they say.
I think that that's the thing. I mean, I think we right now can't say that we're not living in a time of rising hatred, indifference, and insensitivities within the nature and the context of the Western world. I
Mm.
think that, when I think about, growing up in the Cold War, kind of, which was basically the first 30 years of my life, it was an existential crisis, but the existential crisis was the idea that at any moment things could just basically stop, and that was the end of it. And it wasn't something that you kind of felt a sense of kind of like danger in your day-to-day life. It was something that was going to happen, but it would be something that would happen kind of silently, secretly, and kind of like unbeknownst to you. It was kind of like all of a sudden the film would just stop and it would be over. But there's a rising animosity and a rising kind of like agitation and anger. There's a cruelty, there's an indifference that is rising within the West. And I mean, I wouldn't say it's a siege. I wouldn't say it's an invasion. I think there's a lot of dissatisfaction internally within the West. And I think there's getting a lot of kind of
It's a
like,
permeation.
it's being permeated. But I
Yeah.
think that what happens is there's a sense of dissatisfaction. And I think because there is not that leadership, there is no focus, that all these kind of other things, these insignificant trials and tribulations of tribal, feral people, becomes the substitute for a lack of a compelling vision. I mean, I remember I was just a boy. I mean, it was like when Kennedy was shot. But I mean, I remember kind of like this idea of a man who had goals and ambitions and desires, and saw America as having certain responsibilities and obligations to basically be something. That was an attempt to kind of say America needs to be this, America needs to do this. And that was something for the country, for the nation within a global context.
Mm-hmm.
Now, later on, there were kind of great social changes and great social advancements throughout the 60s and the 70s. But these were not really the vision of America within the world. This was a vision of America within itself. Right now, I see neither. I see agitation, I see animosity, I see hatred, I see cruelty. And I think that's because there's no sense of common purpose. And I don't know, I mean, art has been that thing that manifests and kind of gives rise to that. So I feel as if at the same time that the individual artists are kind of dissatisfied and kind of drifting and are obsessed with technique, which doesn't have a basis, doesn't have an attitude, there needs to be something that stabilizes this. And that's the piece that kind of eludes me right now, and it seems to elude everyone because I don't see it, right? But I mean, I believe it always finds itself. It has the potential to find itself. I just don't know how that happens.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel as if there's certain things I believe have a consequence in order to do that. Anyway, that's probably like my final thought for now. So
Okay.
you
I
tell
a
us what you
final
have,
thought.
yeah, and then we'll
Yes,
kind of
I would
close
like
up.
to cover my fourth
Yes,
point
I think we've covered this. Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah, no, I'm saying,
so
yeah,
I
but I'm
can
saying, yeah, I
fit
don't
it
think
in.
there's
I
a
don't
part
have a lot
three.
of time.
No, go ahead.
Okay. There's an excellent exhibition at the Met now, really excellent, on the fan. And people now wouldn't even think about it. No one carries a fan at this day and age, but a fan was an
It's because of kind of
extension.
hard places to plug it in.
That's very,
That's
very
why.
funny. Hand fans.
I know.
The fan as an extension of the emotion and psychology of its bearer, user, or owner. Fans were not just the epitome of fashion, it's way, way beyond that. And for those of you who actually take the time to read the information, which I urge you to do, these fans, they provided, as I'm now stating, a codified language of subtle emotion. A fan was an extension of the woman who carried it in an age when women had to really wear a social mask and were not really allowed to speak their mind or communicate, especially their deepest feelings. So there were fans like a necessaire. These were a toolbox of women outside of the home. And one contained an opera glass or lorgnette in its handle. So they were used for, the fans, social interactions, gaze and communication, and in my words, a translator of human emotion. It is literally like having a transcriber, a translator. These fans were a Rosetta Stone for women for ages. And there are British fans. The ones in the show are primarily Japanese and French. Also, these were works of art. The top painters of the day painted these fans. These were hand painted, handcrafted. One literary critic asked, "Is there any toy more coquettish than the fan? But even more pointed, any ornament more expressive?" So the idea is an ornament not as a decoration, but an ornament as a tool of emotional expression of the bearer.
Mhm. Okay.
Okay.
All right, good.
To make sure.
So
that
again,
covered
I
that,
think
yeah.
that we're in this in between time, and I think there's a sense of dissatisfaction, but I do believe that there is a corrective, and the corrective is basically manifesting that sense of preparing ourselves with what we need to have in order to be able to be receptive to the destiny that basically will kind of come to us. So, and again, destiny is not like this kind of like, I guess they kind of, fortune teller kind of thing. What that means is there will be certain circumstances that will be basically kind of put upon us as a result of the freedom of our society. And as a result, our ability to kind of like, as we'll either kind of, come to understand them, appreciate and see their opportunities, or we'll fall below them. So it's not as we talked about and Whitehead says about the fact that like there's no such thing as a static time. You will either have to deal with moving them forward or having them fall behind. And that's basically the kind of sense that we have. Mm-hmm. So next week we changed direction a little bit, and we're going to be talking about the symbiosis of drawings and models. And that's going to be more kind of specifically to the way in which I work.
That'll be fascinating.
No, thanks. But I mean, I think it's something, kind of I should share. In fact, I was going to show a drawing tonight, but I kind of like, we can show it next week. Yeah. But I think that's basically it for now. I think we've kind of closed. There's still more to talk about. I think we've gotten the essence of this idea of the fact that like, technique is not what we should be illustrating. Character expression is what we should be illustrating. The way in which we kind of understand the character by which these objects manifest themselves in the world and express themselves out into the world is what should be our focus. And it's not, but it needs to be. All right. So the realm of ideas is free to all, and it's the benefit for all of us to keep it just that way.
Grattage.